So picture this. You've been fighting your way through the Pillar of Autumn, pushing through cold, drab, claustrophobic hallways and inching past tight lines of sight, constantly under fire from the enemy. Then, after making it to the escape pod and crashing onto an alien world, you take a few steps and see this. If this was your first time playing Halo, whoa, might sum up your reaction. At least that's how I reacted when I encountered this moment. And I don't mean when I first played the game. This was a few months ago. With so many years since its initial release, it's easy to forget the purposefully jarring transition between the cramped action of Halo's first mission and the stunning freedom and openness of its second. In much the same way, it's easy to forget about the stylistic gulf that existed between every FPS before Halo and Halo itself. But now, thanks to the Master Chief Collection, it's easier than ever to remind oneself of just how Halo earned its legendary status and how this game is harder than ever before to complete.
Here comes a new challenger! Yes! Danger!
For a time, first-person shooters were the exclusive purview of PC owners. From Wolfenstein, to Doom, to Quake. Being able to play an FPS meant having to shell out a moderate amount of money for machines that weren't nearly as ubiquitous as they are today. And then, in 2001, Halo Combat Evolved almost single-handedly made Microsoft's Xbox a serious contender in the console wars. Halo's quality wasn't able to be ignored, even by the most die-hard of PC players. It may not have been the first time a console shooter garnered mainstream attention, but Halo undoubtedly solidified consoles as an acceptable option for FPS fans, with its tale of an alien army versus a one-man army. And his army. While two other armies threatened to kill everybody. Those who were waiting to play Halo with a keyboard and mouse would eventually get their chance after 2 years. But things didn't fare any better for PC players as the Halo franchise continued to thrive. There was a 3-year gap between the release of Halo 2 on the Xbox 360 and its PC port. And even then, that port was for Windows Vista. Halo 3, ODST, Halo Reach, and Halo 4 were all console exclusives, leaving many players out of luck. Even when the original title was remastered in 2011, it was only available on the Xbox 360. And when that remaster was bundled together with every other mainline Halo title as a part of the Master Chief Collection, it too was also a console exclusive. It's taken until this year for the Master Chief Collection to hit PCs. Separated at birth from its console brother for the better part of 2 decades, the PC edition of Halo Combat Evolved was finally back, and it looked better than ever. Admittedly, it wasn't the wait for the PC release that kept the Halo franchise from appearing on this channel for as long as it did. No, that would be the in-game milestone system. These progression trackers, which are becoming more and more commonplace these days, are great for those who spend a lot of time on these games, but seriously daunting for those whose job it is to complete games very quickly. I've been personally wrestling with the dilemma of what counts as Halo's completion criteria for the better part of 2 years, and after too much deliberation and accepting that completion is an ultimately subjective term, I decided to just tackle the single-player content and the official Steam achievements. And considering that the Master Chief Collection only includes single-player achievements in the section specifically labeled for Combat Evolved, I don't feel too guilty about the decision. So, no multiplayer, despite how hollow it's considered to be, and no worrying about these milestones, which, for all I know, could go on forever. Even with those omissions, completing Halo takes dozens and dozens of hours. The campaign may only consist of 10 missions, but with the amount of tasks that are required by the achievements, completionists will make their way through these same 10 missions over and over until they're more than familiar with them. It didn't take long for that familiarity to start returning to me. Very early on, I began to remember all the specifics about Halo. Its world, its characters, and just how genuine and alive the whole thing felt. Surprisingly, much more so than many other modern shooters that I've tried. I almost forgot about Foehammer. She's the NPC that occasionally ferries you in and out of missions in her Pelican dropship Echo 419. Her pilot jargon and the attitude in which she delivers it makes her stand out amongst her fellow Marines, and her distinctiveness is all the more impressive considering that players never actually get to see her. Despite that, she still somehow comes across as a real person with a genuine personality all her own. And that same kind of believability and feeling of authenticity can be found all throughout Halo's world. Halo's other Marines may not have faux hammers recognizability, but they make up for it with idiosyncratic behavior during gameplay. They fist pump when they catch air, they audibly celebrate when they get kills, and they express dread at the thought of upcoming battles. They come across as relatable, as human. Their genuine reactions to stimuli make them appear to have minds of their own. As a result, when players battle alongside these Marines, it doesn't feel like you're going through the motions with a bunch of cardboard soldiers. It feels like you're collaborating with comrades who've been fighting together for quite some time. And while there are plenty of other NPCs in just about every other first-person shooter on the market, very few of those other shooters leave as much room for these relatable moments as Halo does. The same can be said for the Covenant forces, who've gone on to become iconic in the video game sphere. That's thanks in large part to how much they react to the other player and their choices. There are few FPS baddies I can think of that exhibit more personality than the Grunts, who simultaneously demonstrate the Covenant's social stratification while also providing comic relief. The Grunts' utter dependence on their field leaders becomes painfully apparent when that leadership is removed, and they start running around like Muppets. And that never gets old. Conversely, the elites are clearly more privileged and intelligent than their underlings, but their behavior is just as colorful. Their frustration is obvious when they get stuck with a grenade. No one speaks elite, but that behavior is still relatable and understandable. Plenty of Halo's most real feeling moments are only discoverable with a little diligence. There are several achievements that revolve around accomplishing a specific task on a specific mission, and since they take you out of your way, they often lead to these genuine moments. Like this grunt who expresses a big crunchy thirst. Bungie didn't have to program in these little touches, but because they did, Halo's world will always feel that much more convincing. Plus, all these instances of character really help the monotony of playing through the same campaign several times in a row for completion's sake, so thank you for that. It's during those multiple playthroughs that you really begin to notice your effect on Halo's world and the events within it, like how Cortana's dialogue will either congratulate you on successfully rescuing some Marines or show remorse if you fail to save any. Not to mention how your own troops will eventually turn on you if you get a little too cavalier with friendly fire. And yet, while you do have a major effect on Halo's events, its setting and the way its narrative is framed also make you feel somewhat inconsequential, as if this world has existed long before the Master Chief's introduction and it'll keep going along after he's given up the fight. This war didn't start the moment he woke up from stasis. Players wake up right into the middle of just another firefight. Not every weapon is tailor-made for you. Sometimes enemy weaponry is your only recourse. Oftentimes enemies will fight amongst themselves and will completely ignore you. As opposed to making it seem like everything revolves around the player, Halo leaves room for variance and surprises, just like in real life. But of course, not everything in Halo feels authentic. The Flood, while classic enemies, are far more boring than the Covenant. By the time you get to the library mission, Halo almost feels like an entirely different game. And then there are the Terminals, some of the only legitimate collectibles in Halo. Of course, completing Halo means tracking them all down, and they reward you with a cutscene that reveals more of Halo's backstory. Sure, it's technically world building, but telling isn't nearly as enjoyable as showing. Thankfully, those moments of inauthenticity are the exception and not the rule. But it's not all in the presentation. Halo's gameplay feels just as satisfying as its setting feels genuine. And while the purpose behind some of the elements might not seem obvious at first brush, by the end of completion, it's clear that just about everything in Halo has a proper time and place. I've got a confession to make. For the longest time, I couldn't figure out what the assault rifle was good at. It's somewhat flexible as a tool, but there are so many other weapons that do what it does, only better. Since my earliest days with Halo, if a mission spawned me with one, I'd try and ditch it as quickly as possible. But eventually I figured out that it's actually pretty good at laying down suppression fire, particularly after a grenade toss, in order to keep targets locked in place. It's a niche role and it may not be that conspicuous, but it does that job pretty well. I didn't figure it out until Halo forced me on my road to completion to experiment with new techniques. But its purpose does exist, as does the purpose of just about every other element in Halo. The vast majority of Halo's weaponry have clear specializations. The sniper rifle can easily take out single targets from afar. The shotgun mows down up-close enemies. And the pistol does everything. We all know how powerful a charged plasma pistol shot can be, but it took me a while to rediscover how good the plasma rifle is at disrupting shields in a crowd. And of course, there's the Zen-like duality of the frag and plasma grenades, for groups and solitary problems respectively. Any first-person shooter worth its salt will provide variety in the functions of its weapons, but the functions of each of Halo's weapons and the relationship between them all is so clear and exaggerated that it defines the foundation of Halo's gameplay more than anything else. This holds especially true when you analyze the connections between the weapons and the various types of enemies. The Covenant weapons, ironically enough, are most effective at taking out their own shields. But once those shields are gone, that's when the human armaments get their chance to shine. Furthermore, individual weapons can be associated with specific enemies. Nothing's more satisfying than throwing a frag grenade behind a hunkered down jackal, except for maybe throwing one into a group of them. It's no mistake that players get their hands on the shotgun right before they're introduced to the Flood, and no one forgets the first time they take down a hunter with a single pistol bullet. The relationship between Halo's bad guys and the player's tools is perfectly complementary, and if you know what goes where, things feel perfectly satisfying. Things start to feel more restrictive though as you delve deeper into the completion process, as the legendary difficulty setting takes those recommended weapon loadouts and pretty much makes them a requirement. When I hear the phrase FPS hard mode, I think of Halo on Legendary. It's just the no health bullet hell torture session you'd expect. It's tough, but certainly not impossible, especially if you take your time and stick to what works. But while most of this mode can be handled with careful planning and an extensive knowledge of enemy behavior, there was still a handful of encounters that stopped me in my tracks for a while. The moment when the 8th mission starts and you're already getting melted by several sentinels feels just wrong. But it's moments like that that give me the impression of Legendary mode being a separate game unto itself, with separate rules. And you can modify those rules with the skulls, Halo's other set of collectibles that yields cheats. They're pretty well hidden, so they require a little bit of exploration to find them, but they're a godsend on the later campaign playthroughs, due to their potentially beneficial effects on the gameplay and their ability to reduce the monotony. If I wanted to, I can make things harder for myself with the Famine Skull, which halves the amount of ammo in all of my weapons. But why would I ever turn off Grunt Birthday Party? These skulls end up giving further purpose to challenges like Legendary mode and vice versa, intelligently economizing Halo's content. Even within the levels themselves, you can see how meticulous Halo is with its economy of elements. In most levels, after you make your way about midway through, you'll usually have to begin fighting your way back out of the way you came, only now with different obstacles in your way. Halo squeezes every last drop of usefulness out of its features, instead of constantly throwing new things at you. In fact, the entire game feels somewhat palindromic. About halfway through the campaign, things start feeling familiar. You revisit locales that have been turned upside down by events you set in motion, only in reverse order. The end is in the beginning again. Kinda. Halo's creators subtly reveal through the gameplay itself the amount of thought they put into the details and how they designed everything to serve a purpose. Nothing is wasted and nothing feels superfluous. But that's when it comes to the content originally included in Halo. When it made the jump to the Master Chief Collection, a lot of new features were added in an effort to bring this title more in line with modern expectations. However, somewhere along the way, the process of completing Halo Combat Evolved didn't just get more difficult, it also got way more confusing. Traditionally, the lion's share of Halo players spend most of their time in the multiplayer modes. It makes sense, as those modes offer far more replayability and potential unpredictability than the campaign. But with the Master Chief Collection, things have changed. There are now more incentives than ever to spend hours in single-player modes. There are numerous ways to play through the same set of 10 missions, and if you're planning on completing Halo, you're going to experience all of them. But there's only so many times you can remix the same content before it starts to blend all together and you're left with something of a confusing mess. I don't want to make it sound like I had trouble finding my way around the main menus or anything. My first playthrough on heroic difficulty gave me the opportunity to familiarize myself with each mission and pick up collectibles. And even Legendary mode is straightforward in its unrelentingness. The things got interesting with the more specialized modes. There are speedruns, which when played on easy mode make Halo feel foreign. You can simply walk past most enemies since their attacks aren't really a threat. And you're often encouraged to make some less than obvious choices in order to make the par time, such as completely ignoring the epic storming of the beach in front of you, or killing your own men instead of saving them, since their rescue technically takes slightly longer. Brutal, but a refreshing and easy to understand way to play. You'd expect the score attack mode to be just as simple, only on the other end of the spectrum. Slow, plotting, and meticulous, making sure to take out enemies in the most efficient ways possible. But it turns out that the biggest influence on your score is time. So score attack just ends up feeling like another speed run, but this time you have to kill just about everyone. Now there's nothing wrong with that, but since completionists have to play through this campaign so many times, it'd be nice if these two modes felt as different from each other as possible. Now, the two runs end up jumbled in my memory, and the process of doing them back to back ended up making the whole experience feel that much blander. Plus, the fact that you can't simultaneously keep track of both your score and your time seems like a gross oversight that only makes things more confusing. That being said, adding some arcade flavor to the Halo campaign is a great way to add replayability, even if that replay happens once again in Legendary mode. Make no mistake, I would have run score attack in easy mode too if I could have, but there's no way I'd have been able to rack up enough points to reach the par score with the low numbers that kills yield on easy. So now, score attack has become a high-risk, high-difficulty speed run, which at least got me ready for LASO mode. That's Legendary All Skulls On, a semi-official way to play that's been officially adopted by Bungie, complete with its own set of achievements. But even though it's called All Skulls, it bafflingly doesn't use all the skulls. I guess that'd be too much to ask of anyone, since LASO is, without a doubt, the hardest thing to complete in Halo Combat Evolved. You can't pick up Covenant weapons, grunts die in massive explosions that threaten to take you with them, and there are no checkpoints. If you die, it's back to mission start. Maybe my nightmares about extremely difficult FPS modes were actually about LASO this whole time. With all of these rules, cheats, and stipulations thrown on top of each other, things aren't just grueling, they're bewildering. It's severely disorienting and one hell of a challenge, which ate up several hours of playtime. And then, to cap it all off, when you do manage to accomplish some of these objectives, oftentimes the achievement system acts wonky. Like, sometimes achievements will take minutes to pop after the mission has ended, and when they do, they'll often be for an entirely different feat. I'd beat the speedrun for Mission 3, but end up getting the achievement for Mission 1. And most egregiously, some achievements simply refuse to pop no matter what I do. They've been reported by many as officially bugged out, which is really unfortunate. There's not much anyone can do about that, but considering that this game is still being updated, there's hope that it'll all work out in the end. And when you use the in-game menus to try to keep track of your completion progress, you're inundated with achievements from several other sources. The single-player, multiplayer, and general Master Chief Collection milestone achievements are all kind of thrown together in these menus that, for the life of me, I can't keep straight. You have to understand, this collection has 700 achievements, and the vast majority of those are for huge feats that are tracked across every game in the collection, or for the games that aren't even available in the PC port yet. When you're only trying to earn a specific set of these achievements, this game doesn't make it easy to find them so quickly. Steam doesn't even organize them that well either, so I had to rely on outside sources. It's very easy to get lost in the shuffle when completing Halo nowadays, and that almost seems like an intentional design choice. This collection was designed to suck players in and not let them go, and it has more than enough content to do just that. But for someone who's trying to get in, do it all, and get out as quickly as possible, this game can come across like a labyrinth. But with proper planning and execution, completionists will see this version of Halo for exactly what it is: the definitive way to play Halo Combat Evolved, no matter if you're on a console or PC. Halo never had much to offer completionists for their efforts, and while you may think that a remastering or being added to a collection is the perfect opportunity to add in a few new bonuses, you're probably forgetting how these new takes on old favorites are usually designed. They're mostly constructed with the aim of keeping players logged in for as long as possible by throwing constant indicators of progression at them, or in this case, hundreds and hundreds of achievements. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If you have a lot of time and can play only one game, then titles like these can be perfectly satisfying. But personally, after all Halo's put me through, I can't help but wish it gave me more. I finally got to complete Halo and I'm happy about that. Doing so has allowed me to appreciate certain aspects of it I'd never noticed before. However, I wish that the Master Chief Collection made that completion process easier, not necessarily with the full difficulty of its challenges, but with how it presents those challenges to players. This wasn't the hardest FPS I've ever completed, and it certainly wasn't the easiest. But with every step, it was satisfying to see the thought and the purpose behind each of Halo's many facets. When I completed Halo, there were 181 deaths. Sometimes it takes a while to push through those occasional roadblocks in Legendary mode and LASO mode. Thank God for quick respawn times. 7 campaign playthroughs, with things starting to blend together roughly around playthrough 3. But it could have been worse. 23 collectibles found, with the skulls being way cooler than the terminals. 91 achievements unlocked, with the vast majority of them being relatively simple to obtain despite the way they're organized in-game. 45 hours of total playtime, and only 111 achievements for the Halo 2 portion of the Master Chief Collection. That's not that much more than what I did here. Maybe I'll be ready to cover that sooner rather than later. And then once each game in the collection is taken care of, maybe I'll actually tackle all of the collection's achievements, multiplayer and all. What am I even saying? Halo still deserves its place among the FPS greats. It's an iconic piece of gaming history thanks to its memorable world and reciprocal game design. While there are some novelties that keep the campaign fresh throughout many playthroughs, I can't recommend going full-blown completionist, considering that virtually in the end, there is no reward. Maybe bragging rights. Is that what achievements are for? You tell me in the comments down below. So, with that in mind, guys, I give this game my completionist rating of finish it.
Finish it!